All right, hello, welcome to the computer meeting.
Try it again.
Hello,
Perfect.
welcome to the September 27th Housing Advisory Board meeting. My name is Philip Ogren, and I happen to be the senior member here today. And Michael Lucchese is absent, and so is Danny. I can't remember how to say his last name. Theodoro. And so I'm going to chair until he gets here, I guess. And so I will start with a roll call. Let's see.
Karen's here.
Karen Clairman. Here.
And Karen.
Karen Hoskin.
Hoskin.
Philip Ogren, I'm here. Do I say the other names? Michael Lucchese? No, okay, everyone else is not here. Thank you, Laura, for being here from Planning Board. It's always nice to have you here. So that was our agenda started off with the call to order and roll call. And agenda number 2 is agenda review. And we have 8 things on our agenda. I just mentioned the first 2. The third will be the approval of minutes, which we'll probably have to kick down the field till later. Number 4 is public participation. Number 5 is matters from the board, where the main thing on the docket tonight is an update about the inclusionary housing ordinance that's going to be voted on soon. And then updates about the airport. I guess I'm not sure who would update us on Boulder Junction Phase 2 if it wasn't Michael, but if anyone has an update on that, let me know. Number 6 is matters from staff. And so we're going to do a little recap of the affordable housing tour. And let's see, I guess I can skip that for now. Item number 7 is debrief the meeting and calendar check. And hopefully we'll adjourn by 9 p.m. this evening. And that's the agenda review. I suggest that we just skip number 3, the approval of minutes. Is that right? Do we need to discuss the edit, or is that
Taken care of.
taken care of? Okay. Okay, it is 6:08. We are 3 minutes behind, but number 4 here on the agenda is public participation, open comment. So do we have anyone here who would like to? We do, great.
Yeah, let me go over the rules for public participation. Share. So the city of Boulder has engaged with the community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. It's designed to support physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and board and commission members. For more information about this vision, you can go to the city's website. The following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code. These will be upheld by during the meeting by our chair. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person, obscenities, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. And participants are required to sign up to speak using their name that they are commonly known by, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted. Thank you very much.
Becky Davies.
Sorry, I lost the audio a little bit for a second. Can I go ahead?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi, my name is Becky Davies, and I am a member of TAB, the Transportation Board. I do a bit of a cold, so I apologize if my voice is a little a little rocky tonight. I'm here to introduce myself and say hello and let you know, members of the Housing Board, that I will be reaching out to each of you via email to let you know about an initiative supported by members of TAB as well as members of some other boards and commissions in the city to submit a request to the 2024 City Council. So that is the council that will be in place at the start of next year, meaning members who are continuing on from the current council, as well as people who will be newly elected in November. So we'll be submitting a request to them to add an item to the 2024 work plan to update off-street parking ordinances that the city currently has. And I want to emphasize that this is a request that will be coming from individual board members, not something that we are asking anyone to vote on as a full board. But essentially, what we would like to see, the reason we want to see off-street parking ordinances updated is because they've been problematic, certainly for transportation, but as well as, for other areas of work in the city. And I'm aware that they're, pretty significant for housing, given that they impact the development of housing and the cost to build housing. So we wanted to invite you to sign on to this request to City Council asking that they prioritize revising those ordinances in next year's work plan. So I will be reaching out to you via email in the next day or two. I'll give you some more details of the request specifically. Feel free to respond to me if you have any questions about it. I'd be happy to chat. We'd love for you to sign on to this request and have this be a kind of joint ask from various boards and commissions to the City Council. So thank you so much for considering this request, and also for your work on issues related to housing throughout the city as board members. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Becky. That's super interesting to me. I couldn't understand if the ask was just as individuals that we help with. So, if we should help with support there as maybe like endorsers of this proposal, or if something will come before HAB as something that we can vote on as a recommendation. I don't know if that's a question for you, or maybe it's for Jay. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah. So, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jay.
No, I was deferring to you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's a great question. And sorry, I didn't make that clear. So this would be effectively, the goal is to have a letter with the request that we will share with the incoming council, and then individual board members who support that will sign on to it. But as individuals, in the same way that individual board members can endorse a city council candidate, it's kind of like that, except for it's endorsing this request to council. So you would not vote on it since it's not a formal city item. And you wouldn't, discuss it at a board meeting. That wouldn't be the expectation.
If you have a favorite article about parking that you'd like to send around to get people fired up about this issue, I'd love to have a link handy to read and to share with others.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I will share kind of one pager with information, background information. I'll share that when I email everyone in the next day or two. Yeah, I know can be a pretty wonky area, but there are a few resources out there that have kind of summarized the issue well, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other folks waiting to comment?
No hands.
Go. No, go ahead, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn.
Lynn, are you there?
Lynn, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Is Lynn having audio troubles?
She's not reaching out. Shows is unmuted. You wanna move forward?
Yeah, she'll have a chance to, the public hearing portion of the IH update.
Okay,
We can figure out the technical issues.
great. Then let's move on to agenda item number 5, matters from the board. First up is the inclusionary housing update with Michelle Allen and Sloan Walbert.
1 second. She's typing to me, give me 1 moment.
Okay.
Can you hear us now, Lynn?
We cannot hear you yet. Just to be clear.
We'll come back to her.
Okay, yeah, so let's move on to the inclusionary housing update. Take it away.
Take it away.
Yep,
All right, let's see if I can.
planning board didn't want me to do an intro, so.
You're not.
You can do it.
All right, let's see. I need to do it today and then
Yep. Share and then.
if I do that, do I lose my notes?
Yes. Do you want me to pull it up for you?
Oh, see, it's funny, it's doing that. Found my notes. No. That'd be great, if you don't mind, if not. Sorry. Used to presenting from home, so. I'm used to this.
I'm not laughing at you. I can't, I sometimes can't ignore the way that the captioning.
Yeah, right.
This is things, it's very entertaining sometimes.
It's like, who's Naomi?
It's not adaptive either because I remember when we were doing ADUs, it never once got ADU correct. It just every time, but it came up with something new every time. So it got ADU correct just now. That's all
It
right.
heard you, it heard you.
You can just look at mine.
So in one of the
But-
planning
but
board
it's
interviews
yours.
several years back,
Well, this works too.
the caption showed Erin Brockett thanking a candidate for her pettiness. I'm pretty sure that Erin Brockett has never thanked anybody for pettiness.
Okay, I think we're set now. I am Sloan Walbert. I'm a planner in the housing division and I work with Michelle Allen on inclusionary housing. I'll be presenting, but we're all here to answer any questions you have. So our request tonight is for HAB to make a recommendation to City Council on the proposed changes in ordinance 8601. This update's been going on for about a year. We're now entering the implementation stage, and this is an implementation of it's an update of an existing program that's been in effect for more than 2 decades. And the IH program is reevaluated and updated periodically. The last update was in 2018. So just to refresh your memory, there were 2 items as part of the 22-23 work program. They were both related to middle income housing. The first was to consider updates to the IH program focused on increasing middle income homeownership units. And the second was to launch the middle income down payment assistance pilot. And have provided feedback on the majority of the changes in the ordinance last month, at the end of last month. However, at the meeting on September 7th, City Council directed staff to remove the proposed incentives for middle income homeownership units from the scope of the project. So we've taken that direction and modified the ordinance accordingly, and that's what's before you tonight. And I would also just note, as part of that direction from council, we're also proposing to modify the community benefit requirements to remove that penalty for not providing sites on site, providing the units on site. So the major topics of this update are the updates to the cash in lieu methodology, which would align with best practices, and then just adjustments to the code and regulations to clarify age requirements, simplify code language, and reduce redundancies. And then the last item here just is a side note that we did get direction to move forward with the Nexus study that's required to apply a impact fee to demolitions and replacements. And we're hoping to pursue that next year, but that's not actually part of this ordinance. It would be a separate ordinance. So as I said, we're entering that sort of implementation stage of the project and updating the code language. We did present the updates to planning board last night and received a recommendation. The ordinance is scheduled for first reading at City Council on October 19th, and the second reading is on November 2nd, sorry. And if passed, the changes, we're proposing that the changes would be effective 90 days after adoption. So that would be late January. And that would give us enough time to sort of implement the procedural changes and do the updates to the administrative regulations. And just as a side note, IH is unique in that there is a separate companion set of administrative regulations for the program that help define exactly what the procedures are for administration of the program. So the code language is the skeleton, but then the sort of details are all in the administrative regulations.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Backing up just a bit, can you remind me why you brought up the down payment assistance program? Is that part of the inclusionary housing?
No, sorry, I was just trying to go back in time of how we got here. So when thank you, when the work program was defined, at the beginning of 2022, I'm guessing those were the 2 items that were part of the Housing and Human Services work program. And so the pilot has launched, it's been 2 months maybe. And so this is number 1 on this. Okay. So in terms of community engagement, we've been following the city's community engagement framework wheel here. We're at that evaluation and decision-making stage, which are steps 6 and 7 on here. And then just as a reminder, the city hired Kaiser Marston Associates to support the program updates. They did an evaluation of the feasibility of the current IH program and sort of explored nationwide best practices. They did an analysis of financial feasibility of a range of development types, tested some alternative requirements. And from this, we know there's going to be continued difficulty in achieving on-site for sale outcomes. And we also know that a modification to the cash in lieu structure and methodology is sort of necessary to align with the best practices and what other cities are doing. And then I wanted to just throw this slide in here to just point out that the IH update is only one item that's running parallel with the other city efforts to address the housing crisis. So IH is only one way to address housing needs, and there's no single program that's gonna, single-handedly solve the housing crisis. And just also wanted to point out that that missing middle is considered a housing type, it's not based on affordability or permanent affordability anyhow. So the takeaway from this project is really that a well-structured IH program should not constrain production of any one type of housing. And we're hoping that that proposed square foot methodology would remove disincentives in the program for smaller, more affordable market rate units. So the first major item in that update, as I mentioned, is to adopt a cash and lieu methodology, which is an assessment based on square footage. We currently have what's a hybrid between square foot and unit size, also based on a project size. So this methodology would adopt a base cash and lieu rate of $40 to $50 per square foot. But that amount would scale based on unit size. So rather than calculating the required number of units and converting that to a cash and lieu amount, we would just take the entire residential floor area in a residential project and apply the cash and lieu amount to that, or the rate. And then this would also remove that 1,200 square foot cap that we currently have in the program, whereas if you hit that cap, we're going to apply the same rate for anything above that.
Sorry, can you remind me how the 1,200 foot cap works again?
It's been in the program for how long, Michelle?
From the
From
beginning.
the beginning.
Just remind me what it is, what it does.
So cash and lieu is on a sliding scale up into an average square footage of 1,200 square feet. Any project that has units that has an average square footage of over 1,200 square feet will pay the same amount as that 12. It's just a cap. The 1,200 is as high as it goes. If units are bigger, they just pay that same amount. And so that actually encourages larger units and discourages smaller units. It's definitely one of those kind of unintended consequences that we would like to, that we're hoping
So the cap is going away.
it is going
Oh,
away.
okay.
There's a desire to have more cash and lieu for bigger units.
The question? or not?
Well, yeah, it seems like that it would go away just by virtue of the fact that you're changing it to the
Yes,
based on square footage. Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
Okay, so the second item is to adjust the required affordable rents if rental units are provided on or off-site. So the current requirement is that 25% of the units must be affordable. And of that 25%, 80% are affordable to 60% of the AMI, and 20% are affordable to 80% of the AMI. And we've found that those 80 AMI rents cause a lot of issues in meeting the state and federal funding requirements. Also, those 80% AMI rents compete with the market, especially in those older rental projects in the city. So the proposal is to change that part of the pie that was 80% AMI and change that to 50%, up to 50% AMI. And that would just help retain a diversity of affordable rents that have some deeper affordability. So the next item is to increase the middle income pricing on for sale affordable projects, either on-site or off-site. The current requirement is that 80% of those required units are priced to HUD low moderate income, and 20% are middle income. So this proposal would change the allowable prices for all units to move up to that middle income tier. And it would be between 100 and 120% of the AMI. So this one, we know that it's not really feasible to provide ownership units on site. And this would probably be a very little used option, but we'd like to just sort of provide some more equity between the options for developers. Right now, cash and lieu is the clear preferred option. This would just help at least gives them another option of providing.
This is
it
the
on
main
site.
slide that's changed since last time, right? Where it was before, it was like you were gonna bring it down to 15%, and city council said, no, thank you.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
so now it's still gonna be at 25%.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point.
And then you said something 100% to 120%. What did you mean by 100%?
Of the AMI.
Why is there a lower bound?
That's what the prices would be set at for these for sale units.
I-
Affordable to a household earning 100% AMI or 120% AMI.
It would depend on the type. So,
Oh, I see.
yeah, depending on the housing type.
So there's a table somewhere in the packet where I could go and look and see that for these kinds of housing types. The AMI is gonna be 100%.
We didn't do it,
It's
in
actually-
actually, but I think we
It's in the,
described
it's
it.
in the described, it's actually pretty simple. If they're single family homes or townhomes, they would have the higher price of 120% AMI. They're more expensive to construct.
Yeah.
And then condos.
Yeah.
Stacked or otherwise are gonna be at 100% AMI. That's what we're proposing.
Okay, so,
Sorry, one more thing.
no,
Is that a change from before? What is it now?
So it's still that like, so we have 25%. So the percentage, it gets really confusing because it's like the same percentage over and over.
Yeah.
But just think of 25 as 20 and 5.
Yeah.
Okay, the 20 part of the requirement is that HUD low, which is about 70%. The 5% is currently supposed to be split between 80, 100, and 120. It's a very small number of a small percentage. Anyway, it's very ambitious to say that we're gonna get enough units to actually get all 3 tiers in a project.
Yeah.
So we're taking it down to 2 tiers, both of them middle income. Yeah. And the whole 25% would be either 100 or 120% AMI pricing. Is that clear?
Thank you.
Pardon me, and can I ask, plexes, like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, like BHP is proposing, although those are for rent, plexes would be at the 120%?
100, yeah. Just townhomes and single family homes would be at 120.
Okay, because
Yeah.
like the BHP project that we just saw was constructed, so it was like two-story townhomes with a 1-story unit attached on either side, so it would have to be like a
Yeah.
fourplex, but would that be considered townhomes or?
Well, so should somebody choose to put these units on site? They would have to do proportional of the 1 stories and the 2 stories. So let's say it wouldn't matter that they're mixed in a building, but let's just say the numbers, let's say there's 10 of those things. So you would have 2.5, which rounds to 3. Rounding is a big deal in this program, by the way. But anyway, if it's a townhome style, it would be 120. And if it's the smaller unit on the end, it would be 100.
Okay, so.
Because you wouldn't get the whole
attached to each
building.
other. Gotcha.
Typically, because typically we want them spread throughout the project, so we wouldn't actually do them all in one building. We would say, we'll take one here and one there. So depending on whether they're a townhome style or a not, then it was either 100 or 120.
Okay, so you're looking at the individual unit, not how they're attached or not attached to each other. Okay,
Right.
got it. Thank you.
Okay, so, just following from that policy direction from city council. We're proposing to remove the current incentives and penalties in the code, which are the sticks and carrots that were put in there to apply to on-site affordable ownership units. So the proposal is to remove that requirement that half of the required for sale affordable units are provided on site. And if not provided, currently they pay a penalty of 50% more cash in lieu. So we're just proposing to remove that since on site is not always feasible or desirable. And we know from that financial analysis by KMA that they're not feasible. So let's remove that. And we're hoping that helps, similar to the last item, it helps sort of disincentivize that for sale on-site requirement to any degree we can. And then also following from that policy direction, this is sort of an implementation code cleanup. The current community benefit requirement for projects that ask for height modification. They're required to demonstrate community benefit. And the current requirements require them to be provided on site or pay a penalty similar to what I just described. So we're proposing to just remove that to be consistent between the site review criteria and the IH program, which was the original intent, that they would mirror each other. And then we move into a bunch of smaller changes. I'm gonna kind of, quickly go over these, and if you guys have questions, just stop me and we can talk about it. So the first is to remove that option to defer cash in lieu. It's an administrative burden to the city, and it really just results in a balloon payment for homeowners. The next one is to modify the land dedication option to include a city manager approval of the location of the land, and also to require that open space, it can be provided on the affordable parcel independently and on the market rate parcel independently. The next one is just modifying the affordable housing design review requirement. This is for projects that don't go through site review or form-based code review. We're proposing to increase the thresholds from 5 units or more to 40 units or more. That's total market and affordable. So it just feels like it's a little too low. And I think originally the intent would be, it was supposed to be 5 affordable units, but it was codified to say 5 units in total. So it's just not really necessary for a project of that size. The next one is that small projects with less than 5 units, we're proposing to remove the category because of the change in the cash in lieu methodology. It's not necessary anymore. The next one is adding a requirement to the code for housing inspections. These are currently done, they're just not codified. We don't have someone in planning and development services that does it. It's done by private entities, and they just do inspections to make sure that they're meeting all the affordable housing agreements, covenants, and livability standards.
You make number 8 clear for me again. It's I go back one slide.
I'm sorry.
This is for when the entire project is affordable housing.
No, if they provide any affordable
I see.
housing on site.
Yeah. And then I'm kind of surprised you went from 5 to 40. Was that a big point of decision? I'm not upset about it. I'm just kind of curious, like how you came to that number. It seems like quite a jump.
So were somebody to put all of the required units on site, it would be 10 affordable units. So this actually came out of somebody utilizing the offsite option. It's pretty hard to get a project of that size through without going through site review or use review. But somebody managed to figure out how to do a by right project that had 60 units in it. And it was by right. And so there was a lot of pushback saying they're not being reviewed. We don't like that. It's got to be reviewed. That happened to be offsite, so it was 100% affordable, but it could also be on site. So anyway, I think the 5 number was supposed to be. It was supposed to be 25, so it's supposed to be right. So we're really going from 25 to 40. We're just raising it a little bit, but we're also cleaning up that what is essentially a typo in the code. But so this is most important for somebody that for offsite projects, because onsite projects are going to be part of a bigger project, like think Spine Road or Weather Vane. They're going to go through site review, like very. It's almost impossible for a project with any that can subsidize on-site affordable units to not be big enough to go through site review. This really kind of comes into play with off-site projects, and so that is highly likely to be a LIHTC project. And LIHTC projects they have a scale, so it's about 40 and up can make a LIHTC project. You can't really do LIHTCs with less than 40. So that kind of went into our thinking.
So it would be a real unicorn to get a 32 unit project that was gonna have 8 affordable units in it. But if someone came along and said, hey, I wanna do this, they don't need a site review.
They might not have any review. That's possible, but honestly, in 25 years, I've never seen it. So I think it's
Thank you for-
pretty,
Thank you for the clarification.
yeah.
And they would be inspected as well, so that we would ensure livability through, at least through that process.
We actually did this before the inspections. We put the inspection piece in place. Chicken egg kind of thing.
All right, so number 11 is just to clean up the requirements for on-site or off-site affordable units to allow them to be townhomes if they're within a development of single-family homes. Currently, the requirement is that they must be provided like for like. So if you had 100% single-family homes, the affordable units would be required to be single-family homes. This would allow you to provide townhomes as an alternative to that. And then number 12 is also just cleaning up some conflicts in the code. The code currently requires at least 1 bedroom for middle income units to be provided on site or off site. And that conflicts with that requirement that affordable units are the same size and type of the and relative size of the market units. So if you had a project of all efficiency living units, if you did want to provide the affordable units on site, they would not be allowed to be efficiency living units. They would have to change the floor plans to provide 1 bedroom units, which doesn't seem consistent between the 2 requirements.
Ask about number 11. Is this kind of an exercise in throwing something at the wall and seeing if it works? Or did this come out of like some actual projects where it would have made a difference?
You know, it really was tied to our original goal, which was to encourage on-site middle income units.
Mhm.
And we said, well, you know, in that, again, sort of rare unicorn project that's single family homes in Boulder, where they're going to build them all at once. What little sort of carrots can we build into the program? So one was all the pricing gets to be middle income. That's like this carrot.
Yeah.
This was another carrot that, well, we'll let you do what is slightly less expensive type of unit instead of a single family home. So we decided to keep a few of these. This one kind of made sense.
This seems like it might come up at like the project at J28, perhaps.
There was no single family homes. in
Oh, okay.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I think, I can't think of the name of it, the school up here on North Route. No, further up.
Waldorf.
Yeah,
Shining Mountain.
Waldorf, they have a piece of land that they're proposing
Yeah.
single family homes on. They've also got townhomes up here. There could be some way between that. They're going to do cash. I'm already pretty certain of that. But that's the one that comes to mind. That's one of the only single family home projects I've seen.
You have a little reminder set up to email them after this gets changed to say, hey, this got updated. Just think about it, you know.
Yeah, they'll be talking to me. You're Sloan again.
Say, for example, when the planning reserve gets developed, if there were a concept to do tiny homes, for example, that would be considered single family homes. Somebody wanted to do that, or I don't know, a mobile home park or something like that, that
Right.
they could provide their affordable units on site as townhomes is what I'm hearing. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, but I would point out currently, most of the parcels that are large enough to do single family, a large scale single family would be annexation, which is a totally separate process. So number 13 is just adding a time limit of 10 years for the replacement of a market unit in order to receive that waiver to IH. So this is just sort of a cleanup item to make sure that someone's not coming 20 years later and saying, oh, well, this was destroyed by a fire 20 years ago. I'd like to replace it and I would like to receive a waiver. And then also just to clarify who's making that determination on whether a structure is considered safe and habitable in order to receive that waiver from IH. Number 14 is just removing this language about converting from a rental to ownership products, because we're removing those sticks and carrots from the for sale option, and this is no longer necessary because you wouldn't have to pay an additional penalty in order to do that. And also based on that change in the cash and lieu methodology. So, gotta remember to do this one. So the results is we're hoping to have roughly the same cash and lieu revenues between the two options, but it would be more proportionally shared by those larger units rather than the smaller units because we're removing the cap and it's a square foot basis. And then, just to remind everyone the benefits of cash and lieu, because the cash and lieu can be leveraged to provide 2 to 3 units of affordable housing for every on-site unit that could be provided.
I feel like the public doesn't recognize that they often feel like developers are cheating or getting away with doing cash and lieu. Because the cost of cash and lieu is significantly less than the cost to build on site, but I don't think the public recognizes the leverage effect.
Trying to get the word out. But it's fantastic that our current city council fully understands that concept now. It wasn't always the case.
Yeah, and I think some people are just really attached to integration like that. They just like that idea of mixing the incomes in one project and they're just don't really want to let go of it.
It's a good value to try to work for if we can figure out how to make it work, but.
But then we still have the HOA problem that is.
Yeah,
really
no,
persistent.
it doesn't seem like we know how to make it.
So just as I said, for next steps, we'll be going to city council next month and then right before the election. And November to January, just working on updating if everything is approved, updating the administrative regs, the online materials. I'm coming up with a calculator that people can use to calculate what their cash outlay would be. And then, as I mentioned, hopefully next year pursuing that Nexus study and looking at demoing of large home or small homes and replacing with large homes or, significant additions as sort of the next phase in this project. And that's all I have, but we're happy to answer any questions.
And in this iteration, you never, is it true that the definition of community benefit is just pretty narrow and it hasn't been updated at all? It's community benefit always means you're going to provide more affordable housing. Is that right?
Well, there's different definitions throughout the comprehensive plan. The land
Well, I
use
know,
code.
but I mean for.
But in this context, yeah, there's only one part of the land use code and it's related to affordable housing and it's for additional height.
Get additional height for increasing the amount of affordable housing. Yeah, that
Or the increased cash and lieu.
It will be translated.
And that's, and both of those, that extra that you pay, that's called community benefit. Is that right? Has there been any discussion about kind of expanding what's possible with community benefit under the IH umbrella?
IH, I don't think so, but I know that community benefit phase 2 has been on the burner for a while.
Maybe
I'm
you
not
could
sure.
talk a little bit more about what you're thinking.
Well, I'm thinking about East Boulder community sub-community plan, and there's a lot of well, I'm thinking about 3 venues. There's the Boulder Dinner Theater, the EV8 is back in there somewhere. There's a Vision Quest, which are, places where people have community, and there's, and so it would be kind of sad if like, when that all gets rezoned, and I know there's a whole other separate conversation going on around this, but it seems like there would be a possibility of a big project going in saying, hey, here's some community space that that would be instead of more affordable housing, for example, but. I don't know if that
So
even make, I don't even know if that
community
makes sense or not.
Other than housing, you're saying, through
No.
inclusionary housing?
Now that I say it out loud, it seems unlikely that would be considered, but
I think
Well, I
there
mean-
is a provision in the new site review criteria that we've just adopted this year that says the project proponent can make an argument that they are providing a different kind of community benefit that is of equivalent value to the housing. I don't think it's ever been done. And it seems like it
Oh,
would
yeah.
be challenging for someone to have predictability and know that they could do that. But that is written into the code that they could try it. It's just very new.
okay.
Also keep in mind, IH is basically an exaction. So for community benefit to work, you have to give the developer something in return. So you can't exact something and provide at the same time.
Oh, yeah,
So you have to provide extra height, you have to provide, that's
right.
the concept behind it. So it would be outside of IH specifically, unless you're talking about a different community benefit other than housing.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking if someone wanted extra height and in exchange, they gave some more community space or more green space or something like that. That seems like,
And what Laura's describing,
Yeah.
that's how you would do it.
Yeah, it's not, it doesn't live in IH, it actually lives in the planning world of site review.
yeah.
So that's where that would have to live. One of the challenges with that, though, because it's actually been brought up a lot over the years, is that because housing is so
Yeah.
valuable and expensive, trying to find something that is of equivalent is a pretty hard sell. Community space is just a lot
Because then
cheaper.
you're actually just,
Art is a lot cheaper, yeah.
So they'd have to give a lot more space. They have to give up a lot more to provide it in that way,
yeah,
is what I think I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, it's like, well, we can put a value on the housing. Few $1 million or whatever, right? And then it's like, well, what's equivalent? Like a little park space? Nah. Some artwork? Nah. Like it's just hard because housing is so valuable
yeah.
to find anything equivalent that makes sense. But it could be a package, though. You could have a package. But again, that kind of is a plan in the planning world. We all work together on all of this stuff. We meet and talk and, try to make sure that we're all synthesizing, but it wouldn't be, IH doesn't really include stuff like that. The program itself doesn't include things outside of housing, so.
There is another program that's working on an alternative kind of community benefit of affordable commercial, and that's community vitality, but we haven't heard yet about exactly how they're gonna do that, but I think that they're planning to come to us sometime in the next few months with, here's what's happening with community vitality and their efforts to do some kind of affordable commercial, which might have to do with community space and the kind of arts venues that we were talking about. I don't know. That one's always been a hard puzzle, because if you are offering affordable commercial space, how do you pick the winners and the losers and who gets to have that affordable commercial space? It's pretty easy with housing to say, well, it's income based. But with a business, it's a little bit more challenging. So. But that's another program outside of IH that might do the kinds of things that I think that you're thinking about.
Yeah, I think so.
I have another question. Yeah, go ahead.
So can we sort of go big picture? So I think I understand the changes that you're making, and some of them are cleaning up errors and some of them are sort of like simplifying the calculations. And so do you think in the end, this is going to result in more cash in lieu, more units, like sort of big picture? If this gets implemented, what are we going to see in the next couple of years?
Well, you're going to see very few units produced directly through the program on site, because KMA was very clear that 25% is a challenge for anybody to meet, which is what we've seen over the last 5 years. So it's really no change there. On most projects, almost all will meet their requirement with cash in lieu. I think the one place where that might be different, we've talked about a lot, is the very large rental projects. Actually, it works for them to put units on site because they can do a LIHTC project. They can leverage LIHTC money. So that's where we might see on-site units, but outside of that, probably not. And then I do think even though how we're going to set the cash in lieu at this point will be equivalent to about last year's cash in lieu, because KMA said that was when we bumped it up this year, because we increased it 10% per year, it kind of put it over the line of feasibility for some types of projects. So their recommendation was keep it consistent with last year's numbers. So that's what we're working on. But it's a little hard to know. But I would assume that because we've taken out that cap of 1,200 square feet, and cash in lieu will scale up for larger size, for it's not really for larger units, but it will scale up for more square feet. Actually, I'm checking myself as I say that, but we may see some more cash in lieu. We had hoped that the biggest bump in cash in lieu would be this demo replacement idea, but it turns out we can't do that with NIH. But if we do that as a linkage fee, that would be another source of revenues. It's not cash in lieu, it's actually linkage money. So that could increase our revenues. But right now, it's basically the program will run a little more efficiently, but the outcomes will be the same. Very few units on site, and mostly cash in lieu, and about the same amount of cash.
Yeah, so basic answer is no, you're not gonna see a huge difference in the amount of affordable housing produced in the city as a result of this. But it's something that's important to do every 5 to 10 years, is to update the program to make sure it is efficient. So it will be a lot easier for a developer as well to figure out how much they owe, as opposed to having to figure out what unit types, what sizes, and doing all that complicated math.
So I thought you were about to say something that was gonna fit into what I was expecting you to say. But you didn't say it. So I want to just clarify something, the 1,200 foot cap. Hopefully that will change the character or the sizes of the market rate units that get built. My intuition is that if a developer was thinking, I mean, I see you shaking your head no, but my intuition is that if a developer was thinking about building 4 luxury condos that were each 2,000 square feet. But now that developer might consider 6 condos with the same footprint, same square footage. They might, and they could sell that for more. They might go for the 6 condos with the same square footage aggregate as the 4, simply because they don't have that incentive anymore to do as few units as possible, because it's not based on units anymore.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. But the cash in lieu based on square feet, if you have the same square feet, same amount of cash in. That's why I kind of checked myself to say larger units, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, are you putting in more or less square feet? So where it really matters is with single family homes. So that 1,200 square foot cap, literally no single family homes in Boulder are built at or below 1,200. The average over the last 5 years was something like 3,500.
I think it was.
The average last year was 5,000 square feet. So we had a cap at 1,200.
This is for 12 people.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
We had a cap of 1,200, and everything above that paid exactly the same amount, which is about $52,000 for a single family home. Well, now, so it's really going to affect single family homes, and we're kind of working with that because we wanted to affect them, but not like, make it such a high amount that it's problematic, right? So, so for single family homes above 1,200 square feet, they'll be paying more.
But the example I gave is accurate too, right?
In the past, I would agree. So if you were to do 4 units instead of 1 on a single parcel, or if you were to subdivide, you would have been paid 4 times the amount of cash in lieu.
Right.
So that is.
Not 4 times, but more, yeah.
They would pay
but
more.
Yeah.
So, but I just really want to be clear, developers don't typically consider cash in lieu until, or how much they have to pay in the fees until after they've developed a concept and have gone through a lot of process. What we're trying to do is remove any potential disincentives.
Okay, well, that seems like another one where we should be like, hey, developers, build more smaller units.
Well, that's what we're trying to do with the zoning for affordable housing. So there are other ways to do that in our zoning code. I just want to be clear that I don't think it's IH that's driving those outcomes. It's layering on top of them, but that's not driving their decision making.
Yeah, and it used to be, well, it is now, but before this change. Yeah, the 4 larger units would pay less than the 6 smaller units. Not 4 times, not,
Yeah.
but less. So that's what we talked about. We wanted to, there's a disincentive for smaller units and an incentive for larger units built into the way we do cash flow right now. That needs to be removed.
Yeah.
And this will actually remove that. Doesn't mean it's gonna make them make different decisions, but it's.
At least it's tipping the scales just in the right direction. But you're just kind of skeptical. So you were shaking your head no, just because you know what developers actually do and how they think, and they're gonna kind of ignore this, or?
Well, I don't think they're gonna ignore it. I just, like I said, I don't think that's first and foremost in their mind.
Right.
So they're finding a piece of parcel, what it's zoned, what they can do, and they're figuring out what's the most profitable. And then they go through a design process. And then they come to us with the proposal and we tell them what their cash and
Right.
difference.
Can we do a market study?
With the new zoning for affordable housing changes, if it gets passed to allow duplexes and triplexes, I'm assuming that might tip the scale or make a difference in a developer's thinking, should I build one very large single family home or should I build a triplex of the same square footage? Like in the past, that would have been quite a cash in lieu hit to add 2 units where there was 1. And now it's going to be the same, right? Whether they build 1 large single family home or 3 units. Am I getting that mostly right?
Mhm.
Okay. So maybe in that case, it might have made a difference if we had not made this change. I know that this zoning for affordable housing change is brand new and we didn't have it in the past, but it seems like that's a case where it could actually tip the scales.
Well, the way we have it right now, that one gigantic house is gonna pay 52,000.
If it's new though, right? Like right now, you can. knock
Yeah,
down
don't even
one-
go, the demo thing just is, it's complicated. But if it's a new house, 52,000, if they do 3 units, it's probably about 150,000.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
That
that
seems
will
like a
go
significant
away.
disincentive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yes, thank you. I feel like I'm thanking you for your patience, but also for your
It's always
explanation.
been a
Yeah.
big problem, but my understanding was they built it into the program initially because when they first put the program together in 2000, they needed to get developers, maybe not on board, supporting the program, but not opposing it. So they made some concessions, and one of them was, we will not penalize you for larger homes. That was a concession, a concession, and it made sense at the time because they were like, these concessions are gonna get the program put in place. But it's outlived its usefulness. We don't need it anymore. That's causing problems, so.
Anybody else have questions? I have one more. One of the things that just keeps coming up, but it just sort of just gets mentioned and then it kind of floats into the ether, relates to the construction defects. And I know that's outside of the scope of the IH update, but I wonder, like, it's just like this thread that just lingers and it's always there. Is there something that comes out of this where we say, hey, the city of Boulder, we recommend us, the city council, to go to the state and say, we want this changed because this is affecting our inclusionary housing policy or our ability to build affordable for sale housing. And so I just wonder if at the, as we're trying to coordinate with state officials, if that ever gets kicked back to them to say, hey, here's the kind of the things we'd like to see so that we could do the things that we want to do.
Yeah, I think that would be actually a great topic for Hab. I would say at a future meeting to discuss that, maybe even find somebody who might have more expertise than us. Because it's definitely not specific to IH. I mean, it's across the board. But there have been and there are a lot of efforts out there. Other jurisdictions, Boulder has participated. There has been construction defect legislation, basically to try to mitigate for it. So there's a lot of history to it. There's some, like Lakewood tried some pretty interesting things to try to mitigate the risk for developers. During levels of success, but again, it's just a bigger topic that we could spend some time on if you like.
So, I've financed some condo projects and, developers will often purchase a wrap insurance policy that helps mitigate that risk, but it's very expensive. And they say that if you're trying to build affordable housing, you can't make the numbers work if you want to buy this wrap policy. So if we can't necessarily change the laws, it might actually be cheaper to subsidize the wrap insurance policy for developers who want to do affordable. So kind of a workaround.
Okay.
And I do know an insurance company that provides that wraparound if you were looking for a guest speaker to talk about it.
Fantastic. That'd be really interesting. Any other questions? Before we do the public hearing portion?
Hey, who's driving the agenda here?
I think you asked for help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Hey, do we have anyone online for public comment?
Yep, right, see if Lynn's audio is working.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know what happened, but now there's a mute.
You're not
icon.
muted, we can hear you.
Yeah, now there's a mute icon on my lower left. Before it said audio. And I don't know what, if it was something I was doing wrong at my end, I'm not blaming anyone, but it's really essential that I'm able to testify at this board because it's always conflicting with another board and this is the one time I can be here. So I've had to distract myself with just trying to go through all this audio settings stuff and other junk that I don't need to be spending my time on. I need to be concentrating on what you're talking about. So I don't know how to solve this, but it really needs to be solved. It now says mute on the left lower corner. Is that some?
We can hear you loud and clear, and I think your
Right.
audio is working great now.
Did
So
I do something wrong?
When it says mute and it doesn't have a line through it, we can hear you. If you were to hit that mute right now, it would put a line through it and then you would
Right.
be muted. Yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying, Michelle, is that wasn't on my screen before. There was
Oh,
a
yeah.
thing that said audio. And then I went to audio settings and then I'm going to a whole tutorial on friggin' audio instead of watching the meeting and trying to formulate what I want to testify about. You know what I'm saying? So I want to avoid the problem. And if it's something that I did, please tell me what I did wrong because all I know is it says
it's
mute.
really difficult to know exactly what you're seeing on your clients, and we kind of have to be in your space there to know for sure. I can't
It says
I can't
mute.
possibly know.
It says mute or unmute now.
Yeah, we can hear. Yeah, that's right. So you're connected, and the audio is great,
Right,
and we can
But
hear
it
you.
did not
I
before.
understand that too.
Audio and audio, then I get into audio settings and audio options and all this audio stuff that's like, and the other thing I don't understand is that I'm supposed to be on Zoom, right? But when I click on Zoom on my left column, I'm not on Zoom. It's on a tab. This is on one of my tabs. So I'm told by the administrator that this is not an MS Teams meeting, but something's different about it. And maybe it's just that there's different things that happen without letting the user know what's happening. But with all these multiple things happening at the same time, it's very confusing for
So
me.
Lynn,
And I don't know how
Lynn-
to avoid it.
Lynn,
because-
we're not equipped to give personalized you know,
Yeah,
support for Zoom. I'm sorry.
know.
And
I
also
think-
you spent 3 minutes talking about your audio problems.
Right, and I
And
think what we
so-
need to do is have an IT person assisting folks because it's a matter of access. And I do not have that. And that's not okay. I mean,
Well-
unless it's okay with you that you just don't hear me and I'm the one lousy person that's speaking.
I can hear you just fine. So I'm not sure how to give you more access than what you have right now. I understand that you had technical difficulties earlier, and I don't know how to help you with those in this moment. So I guess my question is would it be okay with you to move on to any public comments you might have that are
Yeah,
not
I'm gonna
related to
move on,
technical?
but I'm gonna first ask that the city that I pay taxes in hires a qualified IT person to assist with these kind of things. Because I will not have my access denied, and it was denied earlier.
I'd like to
No
suggest that
alien
if you have public comments that are unrelated to technical issues, please make them now.
inclusionary housing needs to be much higher than 25%. I don't care if it's 140%, which is probably what's reasonable. And I don't care if the developers don't like it. We need to cut development in this town because like in Lahaina, where they stopped the hedge funders from just buying up the whole place and, you know, making out like a bandit. Instead, now what they're doing is guess what? The same thing that Jared Polis is doing. Densify, 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 infill, triplexes, quadplexes, ADUs, occupancy, anything to densify, anything to densify. And they're pulling a Jared in Lahaina. And Lahaina is like demoed all the way. Like I went today to protest my, you know, to appeal my property tax. There's no way, there's no prayer I have other than, you know, $100 or something. And I've had it raised 3,000. So what are you going to do? Phil and others that aren't here now, Laura is ex officio. What are you going to do to make things more affordable for me? Because guess what? Densifying is going to do the exact opposite. That's just going to create a bigger market for the developers and the higher rents that I'm seeing. I went from $5,500 to $8,500 a year in one fell swoop for my property taxes. I went from $1,600 property insurance to $3,500 overnight. This is no way sustainable. This is, you know, what are you going to do is my question. What are you going to do? Because whatever you're doing, it's not working. And guess what? Taking LIHTC funds, low income housing tax credits, is putting the foot on the accelerator for the developer federally. The federal guys want nothing more than just growth with no end in sight. This is called population management. And it's got to stop somewhere. And it's got to stop in Boulder. Because that's the local level where we have the ability to do this. So what are you going to do? Because nothing's working. And you know what? I'm 70 years old and I'm going to get squeezed out of here. At 90 years old, I'm going to be on the streets. And I've got a $1.3 million house. And think of all the people that are going to be on the street with me. Because all the youth, all the diversity, equity, inclusion people that are going to be out.
Lynn,
Because
thank you for
I'm
your
in the
comments.
upper
Your 3
end.
minutes is up.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Tiffany, was there anyone else that is here for public comment?
There's no other hands.
Let's see, we asked questions. Now it's board discussion and decision. So I guess we go around the room and see if folks want to say anything.
I'm supportive.
That's the idea.
I wish that we could see more positive impact with these changes, but I understand that. A large majority of what it is cleaning it up, and that there will be some changes. I wish it could be more positive impact, but I don't see that down the road.
I'm curious, like how you would define that, more actual units on site or?
I think so, yeah. But I understand the complications of that.
You think there'll be more money from the single family bump?
Yeah, I mean, so I did a calculation for last year. We took in about $1 million from single family. It would be about 2 million with the changes that. So double, another $1 million.
But not a huge needle mover.
No, but every little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, for
Every
sure.
little bit helps, yeah.
I mean, and just keep in mind, I mean, IH is a very successful program. I mean,
Mhm.
it produces half of our funding for affordable housing. So, you know, it's just more of a tune-up. It's not designed to basically boost production significantly.
So will there be a linkage fee revisit as well?
So that was actually a planning board recommendation, was to the commercial linkage fee for council to consider adding an escalator like we are proposing for the square footage for cash.
We had one other recommendation and I can talk about if that's helpful. We approved, we supported the ordinance. We had George's very good suggestion to look at commercial linkage fees and give it an escalator, because right now it's fixed in the code. It's $30 per square foot, never changing. So it seems logical that would change over time. And then the other recommendation that we made was Sarah Silver's recommendation, and it was about she and others on the planning board were very concerned about this idea of middle income affordable ownership units. And that if this isn't the right tool, trying to encourage on-site building, that perhaps council should think about or explore the idea of using more of that cash in lieu for acquisition of middle income home ownership opportunities. And I had a really wonderful back and forth over email today with Michelle, trying to understand, if you could get 3 middle income home ownership opportunities through build on site, and then there's the equivalent cash in lieu, how many units would that cash in lieu acquire? And it sounds like, and we didn't have this discussion at planning board last night, but if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like you would actually get more units through acquisition, through taking that very same cash in lieu and purchasing. Now, the trade-off is that those units are typically older, rehabbed, and different parts of town. They're not in the same very desirable locations that new development is happening. They're kind of all over town. But you would get basically double the number of acquisition units that you would get through build on site, with the change that was recommended to encourage them being built on site, that going down to that 15%. So it's not necessarily a bad outcome, that we're not going to get those build on site units, because the city can acquire them through the cash in lieu. And it's not just you're trading home ownership opportunities for rentals. You can actually get the ownership opportunities through the cash in lieu program as well. So. But that was the recommendation planning board made, was explore using more of that cash in the money for those acquisitions for middle income.
What would an acquisition look like? It's like.
So we've talked about that a little bit. So the city has started purchasing condos on the market, basically, mostly 2-3 bedroom places. And then buying them down and selling them as deed restricted, permanently affordable. So it requires
buying them down.
So basically, we buy them at market rate and then we sell them through the program. So they're at a more affordable level. So basically, we're subsidizing it anywhere from $150,000 to $180,000.
But that still buys you twice as many as you would get built on site.
Yeah.
Built on site brand new. So there's a trade.
Well, I'm still glad we we recommended the 15% proposal. I'm glad you put it in front of city council, and it's their prerogative to swat it away, I guess.
Well, and, you know, I think to just reiterate what Jay was saying about how successful the program is. If we're producing, do you know, about 200 units a year? Something like 200 units a year. Fully half of those, if not more, 120 are coming from the cash and live from IH. So IH is producing 120 units a year. It's just what I was, you know, sort of one of my talking points is just, it produces a lot of units, just not the way you think. It's not on site, but it's through cash and live. But without IH, we wouldn't have the money for give or take 120 units every year. So, you know, it's a really important tool in the whole toolbox of everything that we have.
I know this is the time for you folks to deliberate and make a recommendation. I just want to make a comment and just really thank staff for this really thorough exploration. Michelle, especially, I know you've worked hard on this for like a year.
Thank you.
A really thorough
You
exploration.
heard me complain, didn't you?
No. I just really want to acknowledge the effort that you put into trying to figure out how to make this particular tool the best it could be for producing what council asked for. And then when council at the end of the day saw the work, saw what it would require going down to that 15%, they decided that price was too high. But I mean, that is what good staff work does. It gives the information to make a really considered good decision. And so I just really want to thank you for going the extra mile to make sure that council really understood what they were asking for and could make that deliberation.
You know, honestly, I didn't think even us who do this day in and day out, I was surprised that it had to go down to 15. Like, I was not expecting that. I thought it would be lowered and maybe maybe there would be some adjustment of cash in lieu. I wasn't really sure how it would play out. That's why you hired a consultant to do all this feasibility analysis, but you know, now we know what it's kind of like, what is development doing in Boulder? Getting very expensive, what it's doing.
Yeah, I just want to echo what others have said. I was actually getting ready to say a big thank you as well, but you did it very eloquently. Thank you for that. And really like the step by step, all the changes and going through them again. I know it's a lot of work and we didn't even all show up today, but I appreciate you answering questions and going through it in detail again today. It was really, really great. And I think that wraps up the discussion. We don't have a quorum to make a decision, but we can still
make a
voice
recommendation.
individual recommendations. So is there any, I don't even know, I don't make a motion.
Yeah, you can make a motion to adopt. Sloan can put up the motion language, Brian.
So how do we do a recommendation if we don't have a quorum?
We just will say that we didn't have quorum, but say that
The three likely yeses.
how the vote happened, however it's gonna.
All right.
So will it get brought back when we have a
No,
quorum?
Probably not. Well, we might have time. We could potentially, but I'm not sure it'd be necessary because
I think
city council does not require a recommendation like it does from planning board for changes to code. You're purely advisory, so it's not gonna get hung up in some legal issue if you guys make a recommendation.
Could the absent people, like send an email saying we support? Okay.
You guys are the board.
I just realized that you've asked for two things from us. One is, do we agree with the changes to the IH ordinance? The other is, do we agree with the changes to the community benefit requirements in the site review criteria for projects? True story. And we've covered that, right, this evening, okay? And so I just didn't remember that as being like a separate thing that wasn't part of the inclusionary housing ordinance.
We just wanted to highlight it because it's different than what we presented last month.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's still part of IH.
It's
So
a separate part of the code.
it's not.
It's
part of
one
this.
ordinance,
Okay.
but it's a separate part of the code. It's a first site review. So that's why it's separated.
Yeah, welcome to our world.
Yeah, that's not, it's not super clear to me, but I'm sure we went over it, so I don't need to belabor this, but. Okay, so. We are, I think we're open to someone making a motion to,
Yes, so moved.
Try making it look good. Make it bigger.
I was gonna say, I can't read that.
oh, okay, so what am I doing? I'm just
The
reading that.
box, yeah.
Housing advisor, okay, here. Can I just say like, I would like to make a motion. Can I make the motion? Or do I need to ask?
Question.
Like to make a motion that we have recommends that the city council adopt ordinance 8601, amending chapter 9 to 13, inclusionary housing, section 9 to 14, site review, and section 916.1, general definitions, BRC 1981, modifying affordable housing requirements and incentives and setting forth related details.
I second.
So
Vote.
now we vote. All in favor, say aye.
Right,
Aye.
unanimous. It
And
wasn't a quorum, but it's unanimous.
That's what we're gonna start.
then I,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Okay, so,
Take some food.
it's all under the
Thank you
section.
so much
Oh,
for your
yeah.
time.
Oh, you're welcome. Our pleasure. I think that was my 5th time talking about inclusionary housing, and it's a pleasure ever since.
I feel like you understand a little bit more each time.
A little bit more, yeah.
Remember a little more. Yeah.
It's so detailed, right?
It's surprisingly complex. You know, one of my goals for this update was to simplify it, and I don't know that we did that, you know, to any great extent, but.
As long as
Little bit,
Sloan
little bit.
understands it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if let's say I'm a developer, do I come to either of you and say, hey, I want to build a 300 unit apartment complex, and then you help the developer with the calculations?
Yeah, we have an online calculator, which has really been a great tool. We put that in place 5 years ago when we had the last update. Before that, they kind of had to come to us because honestly, it was too complex for them to sit down and like really do it unless they did it all the time. We used to do it in Excel spreadsheets and stuff. It was quite complicated. But so the way it works is that they get on our radar usually through a pre-app or concept plan, or sometimes they will just contact us out of the blue because they've gone into planning and said, you know, I'm thinking about this project, and they're like, you have residential component to it, you need to go talk to housing. So they'll send them to us. But yeah, so we try to get, have a conversation as early in the process as possible, so they kind of know. But sometimes they don't necessarily want to talk to us right away. They want to go through concept plan, for example, without having a very in-depth conversation, because they don't want to. They want to just know, is this a viable project? That's like first step for them. And then they're going to go into all these crazy details. And so we may not have a very in-depth conversation at that point. Some of them really do. They're like, well, what numbers? Crunch numbers for me. So it's kind of all over the place. But if there's a residential from 1 unit to any number of units, we will be talking. So it's like we're monitoring about 50 projects at any given time that are in some phase of development review, all the way from pre-app to construction. So
Thank you.
yeah, it's fun.
I think that wraps up the inclusionary housing update. Thanks
Okay.
again for being here and all the hard work. And the incredible packet. Wow, there's a lot in the packet. I just note that the packet at the end has a bunch of project summaries that are just worth browsing through if you're not familiar with all the multi-unit projects going on. It's kind of fun to read through that.
All right, well, thank you.
Right, now we are still I'm kind of confused that number 5 is matters from the board, and the inclusionary housing update was also matters from the board, but guess that's how we do it. That's how we call it. So now we're on to updates. We have 2 items under updates, but I suppose there could be more if other people have updates, but one is the airport and one is Boulder Junction Phase 2. I assume there's no one here ready to talk about Boulder Junction Phase 2. Maybe an update on that. That's a Michael thing, isn't it?
It is,
Yeah.
but I mean, basically it was adopted by council.
Oh, okay, so you have a thing or two to say about it. Yeah.
That's all I can tell you.
Yeah. All right.
So could
They
that,
accepted this council proposal or this staff proposal.
Sorry, so could that in theory be another topic where somebody talks about what's being envisioned and who owns what parcels and what the timing might be and, or I should just look online?
That, I mean, that involves a crystal ball that no one really has.
Okay,
I mean, the purpose of Boulder Junction Phase 2 was to set the zoning to encourage development, but it's gonna be up to the market to respond.
They did talk about it a little bit at planning board in terms of that, so it's basically in 3 chunks, right? There's a northern horizontal band, a middle band around Goose Creek, and then there's the southern band. And the middle band was zoned, I think, mixed use industrial or mixed use industrial, and the other 2 bands were mixed use TOD, which allow a little bit more flexibility and more housing than mixed use industrial. And the mixed use industrial in the middle is designed to try to retain some of those ground floor industrial uses, but they're probably not going to look like classic manufacturing kinds of stuff. It's going to look more like maker space and, you know, breweries and stuff like that. But it will still have kind of more activity on the ground floor there. And then in the southern band, they talked about that that's most likely to redevelop first because there's kind of one very large property owner. And so they're thinking that that one will turn over first. That's all I remember, but the planning board discussion, if you did have a little bit more detail about that from staff, if you wanted to watch that.
and then let that developers.
Yeah, is that what you asked?
What their plans are,
Yeah. And there was also a question at council about, one of the property owners wanted to know about including indoor recreational uses. And then there was some very sort of bureaucratic discussion of, well, do you really mean our code definition of indoor recreation? Or do you mean more like the stuff that falls under personal services like gyms and some of those more kind of recreation, but
There's a
yeah.
parkour gym over there somewhere.
Yeah.
Over by Sunita's.
One of the property owners mentioned, like, if it gave the example of like a climbing gym, and I guess that's a personal service and not an indoor recreation use, so. It was that to the level of detail got discussed.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's it for Boulder Junction Phase 2. The airport, let's see. So the community conversations, I'm not sure if the umbrella of community conversations has wrapped up, but I'm certain that the community working group, which was a piece of that community conversation, had its final meeting. And that was an interesting meeting. Well, I guess I'll just say, just to review, that there was 4 scenarios that got proposed and reviewed the city council, and one was basically leave it the same. 2 was like some modest updates to the airport, and I'm probably not doing this justice. Maybe some improved hangars, or I kind of forget what 1 and 2 had in them, but scenario 3 was kind of like, hey, let's invest in the airport and make it the best municipal airport that we can. And then scenario 4 was, hey, let's scrap the airport and build housing there. And so all 4 are still alive and well, as far as I know. There were folks that were upset that we were still having a scenario 4 because there was some discussion about an FAA memorandum that said this will be an airport in perpetuity, and there's no wiggle room on this. And So some of the airport proponents were very frustrated that scenario 4 was still being pushed forward. But you know, FAA isn't the only legislative government body that has an interest in the airport, and they can say what they want. And you know, there's the city council has a big decision ahead of them if they decide to pursue scenario 4, because it'll almost certainly require pursuing the FAA or, you know, legal action.
Was there, it couldn't sound like one of those scenarios included both keeping the airport
is not
and
really a-
using some portion of the land for housing.
There was not really a hybrid scenario. Scenario 3 did have some provisions for some amount of housing, but it was kind of more along the lines of housing above hangars, something like that. It's very limited.
Yeah, the workspace above hangars, so it mostly served the airport community.
Got it.
But when you talk with staff about it, there was some, I guess still some flexibility there. It wasn't entirely defined how much housing there could be in scenario 3, but it would be a very limited amount of housing compared to scenario 4, where it would be mostly a new neighborhood, not just housing, but integrated neighborhood services and things like that, but still maintain a helipad. So, and for emergency services. So technically speaking, 3 and 4 were both hybrids, except that 4 really minimizes the airport uses down to a helipad. And 3 really minimizes the housing uses probably down to live work units.
Okay, thank you.
One of the low points for me in that meeting was when someone spoke up and said, yeah, well, the East Boulder sub-community plan, those guys don't understand that they're trying to have housing built that's also going to be affected by noise and the airport. And to me, it's kind of amazing how this extremely valuable piece of land is used by such a small number of people, and that the negative impact that they have on the community in terms of noise is really impactful. And then, you know, it's going to be impactful to future neighborhoods that we want to build over there. So it's kind of discouraging. And then, another thing that came up was there was a Be Heard Boulder survey that got community feedback, and the results of that survey had comments all across the spectrum of noise complaints and pro-airport people and housing and whatnot. But when you sort of like did the numbers, the most comments were sort of in support of the airport. And you know, Laura Kaplan, thank you for doing your duty there in that moment of calling out the fact that Be Heard Boulder is not a statistically valid survey. It's like you cannot repeat this fact enough. And then even after you gave that eloquent description, some guy who said he was a data guy spoke up and said, I don't understand why we're considering this when everyone said that they like the airport. And it's one of those frustrating moments. Be Heard Boulder is a great tool for what it is, but it is not a statistical survey.
And I do want to point out that we know that survey got distributed outside of Boulder County, statewide, through the Colorado Pilots Association, I think it was, and other venues. So the pilot community, not just locally, but statewide and from other states as well, responded to that survey in overwhelming numbers. And we know that happened. We also know that every single person who is a tenant of the airport, whatever that number is, 100, 150, 200, got a personal message letting them know about the survey, right? Because the airport maintains that list and they sent it out to their list. We don't have a similar list for any other stakeholder group. So we know that the local airport community was overrepresented in that Be Heard Boulder survey. And frankly, all along, like they're 50% of the working group. They showed up in large numbers to the open houses. So which, you know, I understand the perspective of they're the most impacted because they use the airport. And if it's closed down, they're the people who care the most about whether the airport is there or not, versus the people who care about, could it be a neighborhood, or much more dispersed and not nearly as organized. So and it's not that anybody is trying to discredit what that community has to say, we just have to put it into context and say, this is one very valuable perspective from one stakeholder group that showed up in overwhelming numbers that is very far out of proportion to their population in the city of Boulder.
Yeah.
So just as long as people keep that in mind and don't do what Philip was talking about, where they try to represent that Be Heard Boulder survey or the results of this community conversation as being, this is what the city of Boulder thinks. We just have to continually push back against that because some folks will want to do that. And so I have suggested, and some of the council members have liked this suggestion, that there should be a representative survey done of, people in Boulder, right? We know how to do that. There are companies that specialize in that. So if you want to know what the city of Boulder thinks, there are ways to do that. And Be Heard Boulder is not that tool.
Well said. I would say that there was one sort of silver lining, if you could call it that, but one of the positive things that came out of the last meeting was maybe a little bit more awareness between the airport community and some of the nearby affordable, in particular, a mobile Lazaro mobile home park.
San Lazaro.
San Lazaro, I'm
Just a
sorry.
village there too.
And just a little bit more dialogue got started, and there was some brainstorming about possibilities for youth programming and for job possibilities. And so that seemed positive, but it was kind of one of these things where it's easy to talk about that sort of thing, and nothing's really binding or. But anyways, yeah. It was an interesting process to kind of watch this city staff plus the consulting teams navigate this very difficult and unusual terrain for them. I think the consultants are used to coming in and working on very different kinds of projects where it's not like, we came up with these scenarios. It wasn't about like, I guess I don't understand fully what their typical engagement actually looks like, but I think it is fair to say it was nothing like their typical engagement. It was very, very involved and required a lot of, just navigating unfamiliar terrain for them. So, that's all I have to say. Do you have anything else you wanted to?
I would just add so the city council did have and thank you, I think was a really good summary of the community working group process and how it wrapped up and some of the highlights there. City council did have a study session about this after the 5th working group meeting, after the working group wrapped up. And that staff basically asked the question, what else do you need to know so that the next council can make a decision in Q1 of next year? Because that's where this is headed, is that there will be some kind of decision on what is the future of the airport, what direction does city council want to go? Do they want to keep studying the neighborhood option, or do they want to shut that down and go into an airport master planning process? That decision will be made by the next council. So at this study session, council basically said, we need a lot more information on, is this even feasible? Because people were raising the question of, can we even do this? Will the FAA allow it? If the FAA says no, which we know that they have already said that they're not interested in the option of shutting down the airport, then what's required? And so staff are going to go away and I think they already are doing some research about, if the airport closed, what would be our financial obligation? Other airports who have done this, what did it take in terms of litigation or hiring consultants, or how did they navigate that? And is their situation similar to Boulder's? Because basically every airport is unique. There's some complications around the types of grants that we accepted, because we've accepted 2 types of grants. One type is just for improvements to the airport, like paving and stuff like that. And those come with a timeline. There's also land that the FAA helped us to purchase. And their argument is that that land obligates us in perpetuity, not just for that piece of land, but for the whole airport is obligated in perpetuity. And that is the piece that may or may not have to go through litigation. And so staff is studying exactly what were the land purchases, what were the agreements at the time of the purchase, and what is the precedent from other communities, other communities that are like us. There's a whole complication with a confidential legal memo that their counsel already has, but legal counsel is not disclosing what's in it or what the advice is, because that could disadvantage them in future litigation. And so there's all of this stuff swirling around about like what can be said publicly and what can't, and you know, what really is the feasibility of that shut down the airport option. And that was the major thing that council said that needs to be, the next council needs advice on, like, can we even do this? Because there was a concern of, you know, are we just spinning our wheels on something that is not even possible? And I think there are a lot of people who think it is possible, and there are a lot of people who are arguing that it's not, and council needs some really solid advice and precedent. Sorry, that was overly long, but.
No, it's great.
That was
Thank you. I meant to bring that up. It was in my brain as I was talking earlier, and then I dropped that one. So I appreciate you circling back on that. Thank you.
Sure, I probably should have just said, hey, Philip, do you want to talk about?
No, you did a much better job than I could have done. Okay, I think that's enough about the airport. We're on to item number 6, matters from staff. Let's see, we are 55 minutes early. We just go ahead, right?
Should I drag this out for an hour and 5 minutes? Let's see, so first thing I wanted to mention, it's not big. Tomorrow night at council, the annual update on homelessness. I would highly recommend listening to that, watching.
You know what time that is?
6 o'clock,
6, yeah.
I'm assuming.
Yeah,
It's a special one.
Some stuff at the beginning and public comment, and it's usually at least 6:30 or 6:45 before they get into the meat of the agenda.
Great, thank you.
I put on here the affordable housing tour because I wasn't sure if it was gonna happen, but it did.
Yay.
It was great.
Sorry, I missed it.
Me too.
No, we'll do it again next year, I promise. And then the other one is just encouraging you to get the RTD pass. So I don't know if anybody has one, but I would highly recommend it. Nothing else. It's a free ride to the airport on the bus.
When do we start using the QR codes?
It's the end of this month, isn't it?
I believe that your physical passes are deactivated on September 30th. And then all of the buses should have the QR code.
Okay.
You've done it already, right?
I generated the QR code and I emailed Tiffany, but I didn't assume that just because you had emailed me back. I didn't
Everything on
assume
our
that it
side
was.
should be good. It's now RTD. They're doing their switch at the end of the month.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, as like that says, we pay for it whether or not you use it, so please take advantage of it.
Okay,
That's all I have, unless there's anything else you guys want to hear about.
So many things, Jay.
Outside.
Make a motion to adjourn.
oh no, you can't do that yet.
Until 9?
Oh, it's just that-
There's more
we have
food
a-
out there.
We have a debrief meeting and calendar
Oh.
check. So let's do the calendar check first while I queue up debriefing in my brain. When's our next meeting, Tiffany?
October 25th.
Let's see, we had a great meeting. I ran the meeting because Michael and Danny weren't here. We reviewed the agenda and we did not approve the minutes because we didn't have a quorum. Becky Davies spoke up during public participation and encouraged us to anticipate her email about changes, a recommendation to city council about changes to parking that they would like to promote. So looking forward to that. The meat of our meeting was the inclusionary housing update, which involved a great presentation and lots of questions and answers, and a 3-0 recommendation, such as it was. And for approving the 2 questions they asked us. And we had some comments from Lynn and in particular concerning audio technical difficulties. And let's see, what else? We talked about the airport and Boulder Junction Phase 2. affordable housing tour, RTD bus passes. And that brings us back to, I did a wonderful job debriefing the meeting just moments ago. And I think we are ready for someone to motion to adjourn the meeting. Would anyone like to do
Can I
that?
just add one more thing? So we don't have anything on the agenda for October right now.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, I'll chat with Danny and Michael, but if you have thoughts, please send them along. I would highly recommend that you start thinking about what you would recommend to the new council, that their next 2-year priorities should be related to housing.
So I know we had a retreat where we talked about what this group would focus on next. But given that there are topics for, like, as you mentioned, an opportunity to make a recommendation, can this be sort of an open discussion session at the next tab?
Or you can talk about it outside of the retreat too. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not limited to the
Okay.
retreat.
Because I have a topic I would like for Hub to discuss, and so maybe we do that at the next meeting.
Sounds good. That's all I have.
Now, does anyone want a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting early. Well done.
I'll second that. Also, well done.
All right, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for doing it.
Did we stop recording? I think we're still recording.